Dr. Kaul. We're totally looking forward to this discussion and setting the context and driving straight into the middle of it. The great importance of this discussion, Dr. Kaul. Can I, request you to sort of share and talk about the significance of early childhood years and establish for our audience what early childhood education really is and why it's important. Why are the foundational years called the critical years, the golden years of the life of life?
The early years, they say, last a lifetime. And the reason for that is that the earliest years, that is early childhood education, actually, or early childhood, actually pertains to the first 6 years of life. And maybe now it's getting extended to 8 years even. And this is the time, particularly in the earliest years, when the brain development is at its maximum rate. And if you see the brain curve, it is very, very steep in these earliest years. And and that is what is actually the foundation for life. It is because it is almost, they say 80% of the brain growth has already occurred by the time the child is 5 years old. So 5, 6 years old. I mean, there's no specificity there, but approximately. And so a lot of the potential of the child or the brain architecture has already been formed by the time the child comes into school. So the early childhood years are known to be influential not only in the school years, but even later in life. Because research has shown that this can actually, whatever the experiences children have in these early years, can really impact even adulthood, not only their younger age. So it is very, very critical. Yes.
Right. Yeah, thank you for helping us establish how critical the formative years are and how they pave the foundation for greater life and have a profound impact on the later years, and how quality ECE provides young children with the most stable and the best possible start for their lives and educational journey. Can I also request you to elaborate on the strategies, the processes, the scientific understanding on how we can stimulate learning and development among children in these early years? What approaches work and how can we compare between a play-based learning approach versus the rote learning or the reading, writing, arithmetic, the 3 R's approach?
Well, that's a big agenda. But I would start by saying that, as I said, the brain growth is maximum in the earliest years. And how does the brain grow, or how does the brain develop, or where does the brain get its nourishment from? I think that is very important to understand. That, of course, the genes are there, the genetic inheritance is there, heredity is there, but that is only part of the story. The rest of the story is the kind of environment children will get, or the child gets during these earliest years, because that is when the neuronic connections are being formed and the brain, gray matter is getting developed in the brain. And what is it that really feeds the brain and gives it the necessary nutrition, as it were, is actually, other than, of course, the actual nutrition, the protein, etc., the breast milk in the earliest years and so on, earliest months and so on. But most importantly for our discussion, I think it is very important to say that it is the interaction, the love, the care, the touch, the play that adults have with the child, and the way the child is sort of, nourished in a very responsive care environment, where the child is making some initial kind of actions or sounds and is getting a response. That interaction is very, very critical. And that kind of in the initial years when the child is very young as a baby, and then when the preschool years come in, at that time it adds up to allowing the child to play and play in an environment which should be very, very conducive for the child's play, and with the adults having opportunities for a lot of interaction and play with the parents or adults, which is something critical for the child's learning. Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's always the infamous nature versus nurture, and what we're stressing on is that it's a lot of the nurture, a lot of the care caring, responsive, caregiving environment around the child, the stimulating environment, the interactions, and play.
Yeah.
Dr. Kaul, can I help you? Can I request you to help us break down what play really means in the most simplest terms? How would we define play for children?
Well, play is something that it's something that you think of a child, and what is the child doing? The child will be playing. Anything the child does is play for the child. And that comes very
Right,
naturally to children. We say that play is the medium of children's learning, because that gets initiated by the child herself or himself. And that
yeah,
is something that the child needs to do to be able to develop. So, as in the younger age group, if you see in the first few years, how does a child grow back with the movements, the babbling, all the child initiated actions. Similarly, in the preschool years also, the children themselves have the ability to be able to, as you said, nature and nurture, they influence the nurture, or the nurture influences the nature. So there is
right,
a close interaction between the two. What is important for children is that they should be given a lot of opportunity for play, which can be free play or as well as guided play. So free,
right,
because we also need to ensure that the children are able to get what we call an environment that, in terms of early childhood education, that catering to the five domains of development. That is the
right,
language development, socio-emotional development, cognitive development, physical motor development, and creativity. And
right.
so the child has to have a range of opportunities and interactions to be able to nurture all these different domains, which are very interdependent. So
Absolutely.
play is essentially the essence of a child's learning. And without play, if you deprive a child of play, you are depriving the child of a learning opportunities.
Right. So what we're saying, Dr. Kaul, is play is something that is definitely initiated by the child and something that the child is having fun doing, even if we adults have our way of seeing and not understanding their play. It is what the child is naturally engaged in out of their own instinctive curiosity. And they often say the play is the business of the child. So if we consider this to be natural to the children and something that, like you highlighted, the way a child would learn about their environment, a way a child would be involved with all their senses and engage meaningfully, how do we compare a play-based approach towards learning versus a very rote learning, the triple R approach, or the thematic language and etc. So how do we compare that approach, and why would a play-based pedagogy have its derive its value from?
Well, actually, because there are two different things. Basically, the play is something that, as we said, comes naturally from the child. And the child responds to the environment, interacts with the environment, and in the process learns through the environment. Environment
Right,
including the adults or other children who are there in the environment. So actually, we talk
right.
about materials, we talk about nature, as well as we talk
Passion.
about the humans who are around him. But
Right,
the three R's, or the triple R's as you called it, is reading, writing, and arithmetic. That is formal learning, that is academic learning. That is not something that comes naturally to children. That is something that has to be taught. And there is a right age
right,
for teaching that. And the right age for teaching
right,
that is at the school level, not in the
right,
preschool level, because that can have a detrimental effect. Also, it is very important to know, to discuss this, that most parents, I think, equate the three R's to actual what children should be learning at the preschool stage also. Whereas what the children are learning in terms of the five domains, that is language, cognitive, their vocabulary is developing, they're learning to speak, they're learning to comprehend, they're learning to listen with attention, they are learning to form concepts so that their conceptual understanding is developing. Their creativity is developing, their physical motor skills are developing so that they can write better. Not only, that's only one aspect of it, but if you link it to the three R's, then there is a time when the children are ready to write because they are already able to hold the pencil and be able to write. But if you push them too early in the years to do that, that can be counterproductive, as our own research has shown. Yes.
Right, right, absolutely. Thank you for reinforcing how play is a catalyst for stimulating learning and leveraging even meaningful engagement with caregivers, something that you touched upon, who can actually engage with children, get involved with children during their play, and help scaffold child experiences to create a better, more solid, and meaningful understanding of experiences. Also, to highlight that playing with children is key to establishing, nurturing, and trusting relationships with them, building their own confidence in encouraging them to explore and use their adults as a safe base, and thereby completing the loop, as I like to say, that play begets confidence to play and therefore engage and learn. So, with that,
Mm.
I'll probably segue to another question, Dr. Paul, on helping our audience understand what preschoolification of primary school rather than schoolification of early childhood education really means.
As I said earlier, that the preschool is not meant to be formal learning. It is not meant to be doing academic learning. It is meant to enable children, already they are developing, to be able to develop and to be able to learn more about the environment in a natural process of learning, which comes through play. Uh, Whereas what is actually happening around in the country is that what should be taught at the primary stage and the formal methods of teaching are actually coming down to the preschool stage. So what is happening is a schoolification of the preschool. The preschools are getting converted into schools, which can be very detrimental for children. Whereas when we talk about preschoolification of the school, we are actually, the national policy is talking about that. The national policy is saying that at least the class grades 1 and 2 need to be actually continuing with the play-based pedagogy. That is very critical for helping the children make a smooth transition into the school. And that we have seen again with research in India and elsewhere, that continuum or that seamlessness really enables children to learn very much better in the school. So the schoolification, the preschoolification of school is more important than the schoolification of preschool.
Absolutely.
More desirable, I would say.
Absolutely, absolutely. And given this urgent global crisis of almost 250 million children not getting access to quality ECD, I think we at Rocket Learning also firmly believe that instead of massive infrastructural investments that most governments might not be able to engage in right now, there are more sustainable, scalable, evidence backed up models on how community can get involved and the caregivers at home and at the center can get involved in this preschoolification. And I think that is probably one of the most sustainable ways of dealing with this urgent global crisis. There are other models and other organizations who are dealing with the same. And I think Rocket Learning also has a very strong belief in reaching out to the community with this idea of preschoolification, so that if we are talking about children who are not getting quality ECD, what is the most urgent and the most impactful solution that we can have? And I think the answer is in building those very strong network and structures within the community to be able to respond to this need. And with that understanding that, play is the best way to stimulate learning and development, and caregivers community need to come together and complement each other to support learning activities at the center. Can I request you to share challenges that you might have observed in your experience and work in the community, which hinder the understanding of play to be the most effective approach for stimulating learning? In one of your conferences, I think you had voices that, parents are coming and asking that how is it fair that my child plays while you and your you belonging to a certain socioeconomic strata send your children to formal preschool, and there they go and learn. So how is it fair that you tell my children to just go and play? So what are those attitudinal practice barriers, and how can we sort of mitigate them?
See, what happens in our social structures is that the more privileged become the pace setters for the underprivileged, and most projects where play has been advocated for children, it is particularly important because children sometimes, because of the lack of facilities or resources at home, they are not able to get the kind of play experiences or that they really require. And therefore, the emphasis has been on providing for those play opportunities, trying to educate parents to be able to create a good play environments. And these are largely done with the underprivileged communities, whereas the private schools, which are actually not under any regulatory system, they are allowed to do what they want. And what they have been doing, actually, the schoolification of the preschool is very much a phenomenon of the private schools. And so those private schools become the role models for people around. Because as we know that any parent who has a little additional money tries to put the child into a private school with the understanding that, that's better quality. And actually it may not be. Because they are extending the whole academic learning downwards, and that is very detrimental. So, but at the same time, the approach should be that all schools, all preschools should be following the play-based pedagogy, and they should be sort of advocated for that, and not keeping the private schools out or any other schools that are more kind of serving as role models for the parents.
Absolutely.
Because parents always want the best for their children.
Absolutely.
And so it is important for them to know that play-based education is the best for them.
Right. I think this what you've just said right now holds a lot of value when there is a common system, a common ethos of play-based pedagogy applicable across the context without any divisions of economy or caste, class, or whatever kind of diversity, then that understanding that play-based pedagogy is the only way to go about and probably address that parental demand in terms of their knowledge or their demand for schoolification of preschool could be a helpful way of looking at a standardized curriculum that is followed across. Could you also briefly touch upon the dangers or the negative impact? We spoke about this, but the negative impact of enforcing rote learning strategies and formal schooling in early years.
See, there are several problems with that. One of the problems is something, I will use a technical term, which is somebody gave it as called a damaged disposition hypothesis. What it means is that when you push children into learning the writing or reading or learning or recognizing the alphabet and so on at a very early age, it's not that the children don't learn. With a lot of pushing, they do learn. And that is what teachers say and parents say, that our children know so much because they've learned it. But what happens is that the process of learning is so painful for the children because it's not coming naturally to them. And as a result, they lose the disposition to use the skills that they have picked up, which would mean that why are we teaching children to learn to read, to recognize the letters or to do or the numbers or play around with numbers, not play around, but to learn the numbers. The reason we are doing it is because they should be wanting to learn to read, wanting to read on their own, as well as to play around with numbers later and become mathematicians and so on. But because the process of learning has been so painful, their disposition or their interest in doing all that gets diminished. Whereas it has been seen that if they are going through a play-based pedagogy, their learning disposition is much stronger, and they continue to be interested in learning new things.
Absolutely, I think that's a great point, that their interest, when we're naturally aligning to their instincts and their natural disposition, I think their interest and the kind of fun and the approach that they have towards a school or an Anganwadi or a preschool would definitely be positively impacted. It brings me to the question that somebody has posted on chat, which is about the young child having preschool or school sickness, and she's been going for the last 6 months, but still hesitates to go. And we're probably not sure if the child is liking the school. I think it's totally in line with what we were talking about. If you want to throw some light on that.
Well, I think it is just one example of what we are talking about. Because I think if there is the diagnosis, the process of diagnosis would be to go and look at what is happening in the school. And one would know that whatever is happening is not conducive for the children of that age group. They are not getting opportunities to play. They're not getting opportunities to be active, because play-based pedagogy is also not I think I would like to emphasize that play-based pedagogy is also not just allowing children to play. It is a planned scientific approach towards early education, which involves, as I said, organizing the play opportunities for the children in such a way that the children get the most best out of it. And therefore, I think it is very important that we should look at what is happening in the classrooms before admitting our children there.
Right, absolutely. And I think a lot of our interventions at Rocket Learning have also been about understanding how we can help build a community of change and behavior change amongst caregivers, to understand that how play is very important, how also celebrating the ethos of the Indian joint family systems, and bringing in that it's not just the primary caregiver or the mother who's the playmate for children, but with the behavior change campaigns on something like Koshish Karne Walon Ki Haar Nahi Hoti, ya Mummy Sajandi or Super Daddy, which is about engaging other caregivers, we continuously build their knowledge about the importance of play-based learning, and also how they can be equal contributors. A lot of researchers have pointed out that a lot of researchers have sort of highlighted how the parents are themselves might not feel very confident of playing with children. They themselves might not feel that they don't know how to interact with children or what to talk. It's more about talking at the children with instructions than talking with them. So our attempt at Rocket Learning through our behavior change campaigns, through the kind of media, digital media and videos that we send out to help children celebrate with their parents and other caregivers the idea of spending time together and playing together, and encouraging everybody in the family to take up responsibility, so to say, to play with children. So with that, Dr. Kaul, thank you for a lot of valuable insights and lots of takeaways for me and for the audience and everybody who has joined us over here. Is there anything else that you want to add or close this conversation before I segue into the next?
Well, I think I would like to just close by saying that the advantage of play over academic learning is not only just that they develop a disposition to learn better, but also that we talk about early childhood education has the 5 domains. The children, their social skills get developed. If they talk a lot, they listen to a lot. So there's a lot of verbal exchange, their vocabulary, their language development happens, cognitive. So all that happens. It's a single package delivery, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And those engaging experiences, like you rightly said, they're actually contributing to the holistic development of child. And just this understanding of what play means and how it comes naturally to children could be a great way, a great knowledge, and can bring about great attitudinal behavioral shift in what everybody was saying is the current demand and challenging that, schoolification and rote learning. So with this understanding, building through a lot of behavioral campaigns, building from what you suggested could be a play-based pedagogy curriculum that the entire country is sort of believing and rooting for, change is possible, and we probably can target and hopefully overcome this crisis of a lot of children missing out on these early opportunities for playing and developing. Thank you so much, Dr. Kaul, for joining us today. We'll take a brief 2-minute break before we welcome the next member on our panel, our key speaker, Dr. Ansha Patel.
Thank you, Sukhna.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Pleasure. Yeah.
was a very enlightening conversation with Dr. Kaul. I would now like to welcome Dr. Ansha Patel, who is a clinical psychologist with expertise in behavior medicine and women's mental health. She holds a PhD in reproductive infertility. She leads the Center for Mental Health and Behavioral Sciences at RS Hospital in Udaipur while pursuing a preventive psychiatry fellowship in Manipal, Karnataka. Welcome, Dr. Patel, to this session.
Hi, thank you and good evening.
Very good evening. Thank you for joining us for this conversation. So, like Dr. Kaul set up the context, Dr. Patel talking about social emotional well-being, and today on this occasion of mental health awareness day, we'd like to deep dive into a conversation with you to understand really what we mean by social well-being and what is the significance of early childhood for emotional awareness and more. So, if you could help our audience sort of understand that what is SEL, what are its components, what kind of an impact does it have on other areas of development? That's an overdose of questions, but the basic idea is to understand what SEL really is, what are its components.
See, there is one thing that is very important. Let's just place ourselves around it. One aspect is that it's not just a medium to learn. I understand the idea is to, from an educational perspective or from a personality development perspective, but the child is learning pretty much when he's in the womb. So the emotional brain is maturing. At birth, it is quite responsive. So the human brain is already quite active at birth. It's just that it does not have the ability to organize a lot of those experiences. It is not mature enough to probably put it into a form that others can pick very easily, communicate, language. Those things evolve over a period of time. But emotional learning is something that happens pretty much in womb. It continues throughout life. And people get altered by experiences also. So it's a lifelong kind of a journey. It doesn't have a clear standpoint where you can say this is how it starts and this is how it ends.
Right, absolutely. And if we break this down, so understanding that SEL is something that continues through life, and like you touched upon, that SEL is also which happens at home with experiences with caregivers. There is no formal, so to say, start and stop of this domain of development. What could be the various components that we consider as a part of SEL? What I'm trying to say is that in a very layman language,
right.
How can we split this?
Okay, so see what happens here is that the earliest thing that the human brain understands is my first connect, my first bond per se with whoever is taking care of me. So who can I depend for the purpose of survival? Food, who's giving me comfort, who's taking care of my initial regulation of temperatures, my voiding cycles, my needs of survival in the initial years. So parents and caregivers, if I would say caregivers in today's times, because a lot of times caregiver is a term which is a broader term than just, parents.
Absolutely.
So caregivers are the bonds through which early relationships and attachment relationships are established, and they are the ones that are the pillars of starting this process. And then over a period of time, it sort of tends to mature. It tends to mature into whoever comes in that network. So you can see a child as inhabited in a system where he's dependent upon the micro elements, which is
right,
people who are regularly caring for the child.
Right. Immediate caregiving surroundings.
Yeah. Correct. Then people who will be available for selective things, tasks, and time points. People just immediately outside that caregiver, umbrella. It could be a school, it could be a neighborhood, it could be the first person who is available to me. So that's my macro system. And then there are layers to it. So as a person expands, he expands from the cradle to slowly, all those layers outside, society, community, work, people outside the city, networking, my cultural identity and stuff. So see, it's a huge thing.
Right. And like you rightly said, is the formative initial relationships with the caregivers and how they take care of the needs of the children in a very responsive and sustained way, so to say. So there is a clear graph that my needs will be met for when I need to be fed, when I need to be taken care of, when I need to sleep. And that is what helps the children form a very trusting, that's a starting point probably of forming very trusting and secure relationships with caregivers around. And again, there are a lot of theories, Dr. Patel, on social emotional learning. It's quite a buzzword. We have the Castle theory and other frameworks which break down SEL into its components of self-awareness, management, social awareness, your relationship with yourself and with the environment around, responsible decision making, etc. Could you briefly touch upon that and help us understand what
Okay.
these could be?
See, instead of going into fancy theories and stuff, because see, that's what the academicians to understand and put it into practice.
Right, right.
Who are you? Just these three words. Who are you as an individual?
Hmm.
How will a child understand who I am?
Right,
The
right.
child doesn't know it. So he looks up to the next person who is almost always around me or who tells me who I am.
Right, absolutely.
And it is these words, that builds a sense of self, that builds a sense that, okay, should I feel good about myself? Should I feel bad about myself? So that's where it gets latched into emotions.
Right.
Am I a good person or am I a bad person? Where am I being good? Where am I being bad? So that establishes habits,
Right,
processes, what I should do, what I should not do. So
right.
this entire word, SELF, self,
Yeah,
it's something that the child is dependent upon people who are around him to tell him who he really is. And then it is until very later years that he will actually challenge those belief systems that have been, poured in by the parents or by the family members. No, I am not that. I am not as lazy as you tell me to be. I just don't like doing XYZ thing, but I do, a couple of things quite well. Until then, the child will just believe.
right. Absolutely. So what we are saying is that it's the socialization around the child that is actually, at least at the outset, the child is developing their understanding of self as how other people in the microsystem of the child perceive the child to be. So that is where the child is deriving, and that serves as the building blocks for understanding who am I. And it is only much later that the child may start questioning certain things, or may not start questioning for that matter, depending on how the socialization has really happened, or how the child may feel empowered to question popular notions, right?
Everybody does that.
Yeah.
Else the self-identity will not be formed.
Right, right.
Am I
And it
this?
is
What are my attributes? What am I good at? What do I like to do? What do I like to do differently? You will see 5 people from the same family doing painting and painting differently, managing
absolutely
themselves and doing. So that's the beauty of human behavior. There is no 2 plus 2 equal to 4 kind of an analogy here. Yes, we
absolutely
establish it when we are trying to help people in kind of normal scenarios. That's okay, just to put them into the balance of normalcy and stuff. But
right.
then human uniqueness is kind of like that.
Absolutely. So, with this understanding, Dr. Patel, would it be fair to say that SEL, for the overall well-being and its foundation, gets laid in the very initial few years of life? And how the child develops, one thing is, of course, coming from a lot of socialization practices, but also the socialization is probably going to lead towards the child even questioning those practices, or having the confidence or the freedom given at some point in time, or the autonomy given to question the kind of parenting techniques that are applied thereon, to for a child to gain that confidence of not just believing blindly in what am I told and who am I, being passed as a hand down from others, but also to figure it out for myself. Would you throw some light on how this as a capacity is something that builds in the formative years, in the very early years?
Right. So see, it's like what Dr. Kaul has already mentioned. The way I'm talked to is one way in which I'm going to reciprocate back, because I feel that that is a normal pattern of communicating and talking. So it's those early bonds through which, they're a sort of a template. So I learn who I am, what am I feeling? Should I feel like that? Is it okay? Is it adequate? How should I manage those emotions? And then putting that into words, what should I do? So, all those things translate into my competency as an individual, my confidence as an individual, my ability to adapt and compromise according to new situations, resolving conflicts as an individual. So you can say that it's like, early relations is sort of like a template for later relations, but it's just like, it's not one way, it's always by way, and it keeps changing, it keeps interacting. What did COVID do to all of us?
Absolutely. So it's a chrono system. The
It
events
has
that are
changed the
happening.
way, yes, it has changed the way human behavior and brain thinks it will grow in an environment. Now, all of us are byproducts of COVID. None of us are the same way that we were earlier. Why? Because see, we've had a pandemic, we've grown towards it. We are all in this, post-traumatic recovery phase.
Right. And these experiences are going to stay with us. I think they will learn habits.
So this is also an example of SEL. That's what I'm trying to just put across.
Yeah.
And what about those children who developed in vacuum, who never went to school? They just directly went to first standard, or children who directly went from school to college.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for touching on that and also highlighting in a beautiful way how SEL is something that continues throughout the lifespan. It's not static. It's our relationship with the environment and the caregivers and people around. And it's a two-way relationship. It's a two-way interaction. It's not going to be a one-way give or force thing. So with that understanding and also believing that childhood and its set of experiences, they have a lifelong impact, and they continue, and we carry all our experiences forward at every point in time. The childhood, of course, becomes the stage of life which does influence, or the experiences do tend to have a profound impact. Can you help us understand the salient features on how development in this particular domain happens? Like, we've spoken about key influencers, we've spoken about how children sort of build their understanding of self and how it happens from being told who you are to probably begin questioning who we are, and that capacity coming in early. But if you have to focus specifically on nature versus nurture, like biological maturation versus your social environment, could you throw some light on how that influences SEL and the personality development, or how a child or a grown-up individual identifies themselves, others, and their feelings?
See, to some extent, the limits to one's biological capacity, be it social, learner, cognitive, intellectual, is already fixed. The genes are something we are born with. So the biological limit may be fixed in terms of the very famous upper limit and the very, their lower limit. But within that, what happens is something that is dependent upon the scaffolding in the environment. So I don't know how would I do, and can I do, and yes, I do it confidently. I understand what I do. This is that entire platform of learning in which obviously parents are the first school, the caregivers can be, another school. The grandparents are very important, strong pillars of acquiring socio-cultural learning. And then schooling is also a very important aspect of it. And then a lot of times our own experiences become the best guide to what we should do. So the human brain kind of expands at every level, at every limit.
Right. So we've spoken about biological maturation. We spoke about socialization, social interaction. Can we also talk about imitation and how children will probably learn from their caregivers and mimic how they feel and react to situations? What is the role of caregivers in that sense in terms of being positive role models for their children? Would that be
there is a thank you for that question. There is a very famous quote which they say, that children are like violins. What do violins do? They play music. Right. So children are like violins, and they play the music that is played in their family without even knowing what's happening. So the tune that they've acquired is something that they will keep carrying forward.
Right. So it would be fair to say that your children are looking at you and they're probably picking up explicitly, implicitly everything that you're doing and how you're reacting. So it becomes very, very important to reflect on how you as a caregiver, as an adult around younger children, and what kind of disposition do you carry that your children are probably going to pick up from. So it sort of therefore becomes important to reflect on who you are and what you're doing and what is the example that you're portraying in front of children, which sounds quite scary for the adult caregivers also to be mindful at all points in time. But taking away from that, would there be certain kind of strategies or certain kind of tips that you would have for caregivers on how they can become successful role models and how they can better take care of their own social emotional well-being in order to be able to not only for themselves but for their own children?
Yeah, maybe it sounds a little scary, but shouldn't be, needn't be, because as a biological parent, if you've had the courage to give birth to a child, be it the mother or the father, by God's grace, you already have the intuition to know where you're going wrong. God's given you that already. What will probably likely come in the way is something else that overloads the parent's mental health, some stress, some life choice that shouldn't have happened at a certain point of time, or something that is a kind of a past baggage which is already there and which just sparks it off. So it's important to, if you are talking in terms of tips, it's important to be self-aware, learn those skills to get more and more self-aware, reflect, take out that time every single day to get back to yourself and how things went and what could have been a little more better. Prioritize mental health. No better day to say it rather than today. Mental health is as important as physical health. It is neglected. And, rather than treating the broken children, it is easy to sort of, mend an adult who realizes that I shouldn't be doing that to my child. Absolutely. So prioritize your own mental health. We say it loud. We say it loud and open in clinics, in so many social media channels, but it goes unnoticed. Be flexible and be adaptive. As a parent, parenting is about learning. Children are learning from us and we are learning from our children as well. So nobody's born like to be a great parent, or there aren't any great children. They're all made. Absolutely. So be mutually receptive, learn, listen to your children. See, elder children, like Dr. Venita has also said, has the ability, an elder child, a 4 to 5 year old child, when they have language, they are very honest. It is just that we shut them down. So we have to listen to them. We have to ask them, do I make you a proud, do I make you a proud, kid of a proud, do you feel proud of myself? So you need to get that answer. You need to know where you're going wrong, and your children will guide you. They are the best guiding forces because they don't know how to lie in the initial stages. Absolutely. And constant adaptation, getting back on yourself, taking care, reflecting will definitely not waver you too far from the healthy ways. It will still keep you in the rut.
Right. So key takeaway for me then become that you take care of yourself, self-care, taking out active time to reach out to yourself, introspect, understand how you're reacting to situations. That is one. Active listening and open communication definitely sets the way for emotional bonding with the children. And when they know that, my trusted caregivers believe in me and they're there for me, irrespective of any kind of situation or irrespective of how I perform or how I do. And of course, talking also about your emotions and your feelings, can I request you to sort of allude to how important is the idea of labeling your feelings, validating your feelings in this journey of well-being and emotional awareness?
See, it's very simple. It's like objectification. If I ask you, what is this? Everybody out there, what is this? You will say it is a pen. No, you will say it's a pen, a pencil, a writing instrument, somewhere close to that. If I say, okay, what is this? You would say this is, it is as simple as that. It is as simple as that. And if you see what I see, and we come on the same ground, that is what emotional validation does to a child. That is what it does to our brain. We feel safe. We feel right. We feel,
Right.
yes, we are feeling what the other person is feeling within the same line. So that is knowing it, assessing the emotion, being able
Right.
to say this is what it is what the labeling process is doing. It is as simple as that. And then you need to learn the ability to regulate it.
Right. Right.
The problem comes when I say that this is a pen, the other person say, no, no, this is a tractor. What you're saying is wrong. You should not feel like that.
Absolutely. So acknowledging your own feelings is very important as they are, and probably also not dismissing them or categorizing them as positive or negative or good or bad feelings, as we say that certain emotions are generally classified as negative or bad emotions. Can you allude to that as well, please?
Yes, I'm so glad. So Kanyaji, you've made that point, because God has given us 6 vital emotions. Everywhere, all creed, all caste, or people of the different skin colors and backgrounds are identifying as at least 6 to 8 kinds of basic emotions. Every emotion has an important function. If I don't feel scared, I will not be able to keep myself safe.
Right.
If
Absolutely.
I don't feel angry, I will not be able to defend myself. If I don't feel excited, my brain will not know what I'm looking forward to, what I should reach out to. It is the same way how other emotions are also placed. So every emotion, see, that's the reason why it's there in our makeup. Everything has a very high value of biological adaptivity. And humans are unique. Why? Because they have the ability of regulating their environment and creating things among themselves, which is not common to other mammals. It's not so much so.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
And that relies on the ability to regulate emotions, because we still have, parts of our reptile brain, the early reptilian brain is still there in our psyche. So when we get very scared, we can get, frozen, we can get numb. Our reptilian brain doesn't let us act, or we drop, or we faint, or we feel dizzy. We still have, fear and worry as a very important part of our mammalian brain active. So if I feel, oh my God, that's it. My thinking brain shuts down, or it freaks out. I might not be able to make a very good decision if my brain feels threatened. So that can just be like an emotional hijack for me. And then later comes my neocortex. So that is my primate brain. But then my primate brain will only function if I feel safe, which is I am not threatened and I feel calm, which is my midbrain is telling me everything is okay, Ansha. Speak. She's listening. They are there. Work. We'll figure out. So that's the executive control.
Yeah. Thank you for explaining this very, very beautifully. I think this is an important point of discussion, and very well explained by you, that how all emotions are very, very important, and they're there for a reason, and we cannot classify certain emotions or feelings as negative ones. And while talking about that, it also therefore becomes important for even caregivers around the child to acknowledge these emotions for themselves and for their children, and help them also understand as a coping strategy that how every feeling is sort of transient. It will get over. The child would feel better. The child would be able to manage, and expressing that confidence in children by validating their feelings, by reminding them that they're always there, irrespective of how a child may feel at a certain point in time, and empowering them with the confidence that they have control in themselves to be able to take over and manage their feelings better, could be useful ways to talk about and build that understanding of emotions among children. Any comment on that, Dr. Patel?
Yeah, true.
Great. So basically, even for learning, when we talk about social emotional well-being, and we try as an organization in EPPE catering to all domains of development, we call ourselves people who are responding to the holistic needs of the children and holistic, so SEL is an important part of it. And this is the kind of strategy that we also follow in our content and curriculum to sort of help children identify these feelings, not as positive or negative, but just to acknowledge them as the first step to being able to better manage them. And then tips to caregivers on how they can also manage their feelings better, how they can communicate about their feelings so the children feel that it is normal to experience every kind of feeling, because my trusted adults, my caregivers also feel the same. And there's nothing wrong in a feeling being there. And then feeling empowered that I can control them, that I am not my feeling, dissociating from your feeling. A lot of our content focuses around that, around building also emotion management strategies of, grounding techniques or something that I can do. While this technique may look different for you and for me and for everybody else, but I can definitely find some technique that can help me feel better in certain situations. It may not work always, but in 9 out of 10 cases, it might work, or I can experiment with these techniques. I think a big, huge chunk of our SEL content focuses on building that. That, can I request you to also touch upon briefly on the understanding in terms of milestones for young children, for the 0 to 8 age group? What are the key milestones of social and emotional awareness among children, of gender identity, etc., among children? How and when this sort of develops and reaches a more or less a state of deeper understanding of who I am?
Who I am evolves. Okay, it's not that easy. It evolves till you die. It is from birth, even till the grave point. There may be some dilemma. Who am I? Okay, I don't know, maybe this.
Yeah.
Or if I tell you to tell 5 attributes about you, 5 positive and 5 negative, you will start with,
yeah.
okay. But then in small children, as long as they are able to attain normal speech and social interaction capacities, anywhere between 4 to say about 6, they have a good amount of understanding into what is really happening inside me, who do I need, and how can I help myself, at least temporarily. So initially it may be codependent. My relations and my emotions are both codependent in the initial very infancy period.
Okay. Right.
But after 2 years onwards, usually till 3.5, we know that the child will be able to make one sentence and sort of speak up and tell. And by God's grace, all children are born honest. Okay. So it is for the adult to be honest and to be able to understand what to do and acknowledge that honesty. And after that, that's the reason why schooling, higher schooling starts at that age, probably between 4 to 5 is the ideal point of time, because the child can actually know the emotional state and have a basic capacity to self-soothe. Whereas he's still dependent on, the social learning, the teacher or the peer or the good friend around him to soothe and calm him and to help him out. And then anywhere between early adolescence to say about late adolescence, self-regulation capacities become, even more better. Why? Because critical thinking, being able to give up your own point of view and exchange point of view, thinking out, so diversifying into different things, problem solving, that doesn't mature until the later years. The child still needs, say about 15 to 16 years of, normally running life to be able to figure that out. And same thing is with emotional and social learning. A lot of times what happens, I would like to put this thing on record, is emotional learning may be hampered. Social learning may also be hampered, but intellectual learning is not hampered. So the child is a very high achiever at school, but is very scared to mingle with children, is an isolator, is having anger outbursts, has difficulty in understanding how to manage. He usually distracts himself from a lot of his negative emotional states, cannot switch or experience or create positive emotional states. So it is like a single thread. If one capacity is developed, the other will naturally develop. That doesn't happen. And as adults also, we switch back and forth between these abilities.
Absolutely, absolutely. And while we did talk about COVID as an example, could you also sort of help us understand how chronic toxic stress, especially for marginalized society, for children who are born in lower socioeconomic households, and other form of chronic stress that we might face in terms of disease, in terms of migrancy, in terms of absence or lack of care from essential caregivers, how does that impact the well-being of young children as a whole?
Yeah, see what happens is we call it the ACEs, adverse childhood events, which have the capacity to create complex trauma reactions, which is develops in the form of developmental trauma for a child. In the years where a lot of things should have been there, they did not happen. For instance, it could be in the form of a emotionally sensitive caregiver, proper consistent caregiver, or a mentally stable caregiver who was available to the child, right? So there are usually three categories in which you divide adverse childhood experiences. One is in terms of emotional events. The second is household dysfunction, and the third is neighborhood or environmental dysfunction. So poverty and stuff would fall, terrorism and unstable neighborhood, living in low intensity zones where war can happen at any point of time. There are bombs that the children are hearing. All these are adverse environmental events. Household dysfunction can be something like a marital discord, family has a member with untreated mental illness, both the parents are struggling with their own mental health conditions and stuff like that, or abuse in any form. And the first one is broadly emotional, obviously covers emotional abuse and neglect. And it's very easy to say in two terms. Many things unsaid are there under this. This has a equational relationship to the intensity of complex trauma reactions that come up in the human brain. And it can have a kind of PTSD kind of a trajectory, where the adult person who lives through all these things will manifest at least 3 to 4 varieties of comorbid psychiatric problems. And
Right.
but they are treatable if they are identifiable, and there is a intensity and there is a way of treating and unlearning these things and getting back to life.
And I think the first step to that would be again the sensitization of caregivers to acknowledge that stress can have a profound impact, even if it's stress induced by them or by surroundings or by the components that you mentioned. I think the first step to being able to deal with that is to acknowledge that toxic stress can have a profound negative impact. And sensitive caregivers, observant caregivers, mindful caregivers who understand this and who acknowledge or are sensitive to the behavioral differences that they might see in their children, to acknowledge that there is something which requires attention, because a child may not be able to verbalize what they might be feeling, but I think that would reflect on their behavior and in terms of how they're dealing with their otherwise situation. Any thoughts, comments on how critical it is for, I mean, we've sort of defined responsible caregiving in so many ways in our conversation today. And this again becomes an important component of that, to be mindful, observant, and sensitive towards their children, and some basic understanding on how this domain of development is vital, critical, and requires a lot of attention from the caregivers around. With that, I'll also just briefly, we're reaching towards the end of the session, but briefly just tell you to elaborate on a comment that you had put, learn by learning. Could you just elaborate on that, and in what context and how do you understand this?
I would say learn by unlearning, learn by relearning, and then you learn by learning.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Patel. This is really, really insightful, and I'm sure there have been a lot of conversations and very deep delving into the idea of social emotional well-being. So thank you so much for joining us today and for sparing time to this. I think this is I think you summed it up by saying that learn by unlearning. And I think the key takeaway for me was also the understanding that SEL is not something that has a start and a stop point. It sort of continues to change. Who I am may change a couple of months down the line. And if you ask me who are you, the answer probably might be different, because I'm always learning and unlearning from people around me and from who I am as a person. Should I have been given the autonomy and the freedom and the confidence to sort of question that? Thank you so much, Dr. Patel, for joining us today. And thank you to all our viewers for attending this webinar. Hope this was insightful and enlightening for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
End
Thank
the
you so
session
much.
with that. Thank you, Dr. Patel. Thank you.